once again, welcome. Glad you're here, and happy Father's Day. A quick question as we start today, maybe a little straw poll. We'll see. Does anyone in here, are you either wearing or do you have something with you today that you consider to be sentimental, that you like to carry with you? It could be a ring or a necklace or maybe even a Bible. If you have one, raise your hand. Oh, we have a few. Good. Oh, yeah, look, a lot of them. Okay. Now, maybe the tougher question, is anybody wearing a locket today? Have any lockets out there? No. Okay, fascinating. I thought I would get at least one. But we're going to talk about lockets as we start today. The locket has a fascinating history. We can date lockets all the way back to kind of the idea of amulets or good luck charms that people used to wear around their necks. They progressed from that point into boxes that would then hold good luck charms or amulets. And then once we had boxes around our necks, they got used for all kinds of things, including, which I thought this one was fascinating, in the age before personal hygiene was as accessible as it is now, they had lockets with little almost foam pads in them, and you could soak them in like perfume or cologne and wear them so it helped smell better. You could have little personal hygiene things in there. Some of them, of course, before the camera, before photography developed, had elaborate etchings in them or carvings. This is one of the earliest known examples of a locket with a picture. This is Queen Elizabeth I's ring from 1575, and it contains a portrait of herself on one side and then her mother, Anne Boleyn, on the other. And of course, this is carved out of the metal that's in there, which is pretty incredible. And then from kind of this remembrance idea also came the idea of remembering someone who had passed away. So for a while, amulets or lockets became really popular by containing locks of hair of someone that people wanted to remember. And then, of course, photography kind of changed the game. And so now, especially around the time of World War I, photography came into development, as well as the time when people were going off to war and being separated from loved ones and people that they wanted to feel connected to and wanted to remember. And so lockets with pictures in them became pretty popular around that time as well. The locket is an item of remembrance. We still use it for this same purpose today. They are reminders of people or items or memories that we hold dear. And we take those things and we wear them. We can feel them. We can look at them. And as the case with lockets and then just our sentimental items that we might have with us today, we tend to keep them close to us. We're in Daniel. We'll be moving to Daniel chapter 8 today in our series called Living with Lions. And we are going through Daniel chapter by chapter and seeing what all is happening here. And we're to a pretty crucial spot in the book of Daniel. We spent the first 6 chapters in kind of a historical narrative structure. We got these stories of these people, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and we learned about them and the things that were happening in their lives. They had several run-ins with some kings that were kind of egotistical and kind of bent on doing some things that God's people were not that excited about. Time and time again, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah proved themselves worthy. In particular, Daniel's reputation seems to hold a specific weight. We are introduced to several different kings throughout the first 6 chapters of Daniel, and 50 to 60, 70 years of history in between those 6 chapters. And every king that comes to power seems to know Daniel and respect Daniel and know what he's capable of doing, and more importantly, know that he has this connection to his God, and that God can speak to Daniel, and that Daniel can hear God. And then in chapter 7, things change. The tone of the book changes, the way the book is written changes, and we move from this historical narrative structure to dreams and interpretations. So we really have these 2 halves here. We also change time periods a little bit. We go back in time when we hit chapter 7 to King Belshazzar, which happens kind of in between chapter 4 and the beginning of chapter 5. We also talked last week about Daniel chapter 7. Some writers or some theologians believe might be one of the most important chapters in the book of our entire Bible. Daniel chapter 7 contains a lot of really important information and imagery that we see moving forward from this point. And in Daniel 7, we are also introduced to the idea of apocalyptic literature. If you're unfamiliar with that, most of Revelation is written in this style. And we talked about apocalyptic literature being this kind of pulling back of the curtain idea. We're going to write in sort of a code, but a code that most people at this time would have understood. We're going to use vibrant images. We're going to talk about beasts, dragons, angels, fire, colors, symbolic numbers, all of these sorts of things in order to paint a picture of what's happening. And again, the idea behind apocalyptic literature is seeing what's happening on earth from an eternal perspective. Let's pull back the curtain on all the big things that are happening here, and let's see who's really pulling the strings here. Let's see what's really happening in these global ideas. Again, this is very symbolic in nature, almost like a code, but again, these are images and representations that the people of this time period would have absolutely understood, and so it would not have necessarily need to have been interpreted for them. But for us, thousands of years later, it sure helps to have these interpreted, and so we'll go through those. And hopefully, if you're paying attention in Daniel chapter 7, you'll see some images that you will recognize in chapter 8. And the cool part is once you start to get these images down and you start to recognize what's happening, you can just start to decipher them yourself. So hopefully you notice some familiar things in chapter 8. In chapter 7, some big ideas we carry through. We were introduced to all these scary beasts, these kind of combinations of animals, leopards with wings and lions with eagles' wings and all sorts of crazy stuff. And these beasts, Daniel is told, relate to earthly kings. So that's our first clue. These are not scary monsters that you might see sometime. The angel tells Daniel these are kings here on earth. These are representative of kings. We also learn in Daniel chapter 7 about this term Ancient of Days, which is such a beautiful term to describe God. We are introduced to the Ancient of Days, and we realize that the Ancient of Days is on the throne. And even as all these scary beasts are coming and going, the Ancient of Days is there, and he is seeing what's happening. And then we're introduced to the Son of Man, a phrase that Jesus will use so many times to describe himself, especially in the book of Matthew, in an absolute reference to this passage. The Son of Man is coming, and he will be given power. So now that we've kind of got this recap here, we kind of know where we're headed. We're back still in apocalyptic literature in chapter 8, and that'll become pretty evident because very immediately we'll start seeing some of these beasts and animals again. So dig in with me. We'll begin in chapter 8, verse 1. In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, so 3 years after, 2-ish years, 3 years after the last dream, I, Daniel, had a vision after the one that had already appeared to me. In my vision, I saw myself in the citadel of Susa, in the province of Elam. In the vision, I was beside the Ulai Canal. All right. So we have this introduction, and to us we go, okay, those are a lot of places that I don't know, a lot of things that I don't understand. So let's go ahead and throw this up here because this might help. So we're introduced to this time period. Daniel says this is the 3rd year of Belshazzar. So if we're dating things back, this is roughly around 550 BC. Give or take a year or two. And this is a tumultuous time to be living in Babylon. This is a crazy time to be a Babylonian or be in Babylonian captivity, as God's people are. King Cyrus has come out of this Persian area right here. King Cyrus has come out of Persia, and he has formed the Medo-Persian alliance. So now all of a sudden, these two areas right here are teamed up. They're working together. The Babylonian king, who they happen to be right here, they start to get a little worried, right? All of a sudden, Cyrus has a pact with Medians, and they have the Medo-Persian Empire now, and they start to wonder what exactly Cyrus is up to. They start to worry that Cyrus has bigger plans, and those worries would be correct. Cyrus does have much bigger plans. And so the king of Babylon reaches out to Egypt and Lydia, and he says, hey, listen, the Medes and the Persians just formed this alliance. I think we need to tag up so that we're not overrun, and those talks do not go well. But what happens at this time around 550 is that people who are living in Babylon and God's people who are living in Babylon are watching what is happening with King Cyrus and the king of Babylon, and they are nervous. The whole world is watching Cyrus. They're wondering what Cyrus is up to with this merger. They're wondering what Cyrus's plans are for the future. And God's people and the Babylonians as a whole are worried about what is coming next. And it's in this specific time period that God is going to send this vision to Daniel. Daniel makes a specific note of a place that he is in the dream. Daniel says he is in Susa, which is a fortified city about 200 miles away from the Babylonian capital. That would become the capital of the Medo-Persian Empire after the fall of Babylon. And so we go, okay, he's in Susa. Great. What does that mean? The people that are reading this go, oh, wait. Daniel is on the border in between Babylon and the Medo-Persian Empire. So when Daniel has his dream, he says in this dream he is taken to the front line of this impending battle in between the Medes and the Persians and the Babylonians. All right, let's keep going. Verse 3, I looked up, and there before me was a ram with 2 horns standing beside the canal, and the horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. I watched the ram as it charged toward the west and the north and the south. No animal could stand against it, and none could rescue it from its power. It did as it pleased, and it became great. Now, if you read chapter 7 with us last week, you remember that there was an animal that was also comprised of 2 sides, and one side was bigger than the other. You remember that? The bear that was lifted up on one side. And so now this is going to be the same empire. These are the Medes and the Persians. So Daniel says, I see this ram here, and the ram has 2 horns, and one's bigger than the other. This is a reference to the Medo-Persian Empire because actually it looks here like we had it backwards last week. Cyrus comes from Persia. He makes this pact with the Medians, and then immediately he is in charge of the whole empire, and he moves all of the power of the Medo-Persian Empire back to Persia, and really quickly Persia outgrows Media by a large portion. So you hear this referred to here, that one of the horns was smaller at first, and then it grew to be larger. This is talking about this merger between the Medes and the Persians. We also hear reference to, again, these are images that these people would have known. Historians after this, pretty close to this time period, have written in history that the Persian ruler was known to have marched before his army holding a golden ram's head. So when Daniel says, I saw a ram with 2 horns, they go, oh, Medes and the Persians. Right? We know this story. And then we're told that the ram goes on this rampage and expands west, north, and south. Well, if you start right here at the Medo-Persian Empire, where are you going to expand to? West, north, and south. So King Cyrus is about to go, Daniel says. King Cyrus is going to expand. He's heading west, north, and south, and if you're the Babylonians, you're right in the middle of that path. Keep going in verse 5. As I was thinking about this, suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between its eyes came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. It came toward the 2-horned ram I had seen standing beside the canal, and it charged at it in a great rage. I saw it attack the ram furiously, striking the ram and shattering its 2 horns. The ram was powerless to stand against it. The goat knocked it to the ground and trampled on it, and none could rescue the ram from its power. The goat became very great, but at the height of its power, the large horn was broken off, and in its place 4 prominent horns grew up toward the 4 winds of heaven. All right, another crazy image here. Okay, so now we've got a goat, and we've got not just a goat. We have a goat with 1 prominent horn in between its eyes. We've got a unicorn goat. All right, so we've got a unicorn goat with this big prominent horn, and it comes flying across the world so fast that it's not even touching the ground. Okay, now remember last week, back to chapter 7. There was an animal that was noted for speed and bloodlust. In fact, it was a leopard with all of these wings on its back, which made it super fast. This is the same kingdom we're talking about here. A goat that's going so fast that its feet don't even touch the ground. And this, of course, is Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great in the Greek Empire. The Greek Empire is representative of the goat, and then the horn, of course, is Alexander. And he moves with incredible speed, as we talked about last week. But another couple of notes we didn't get to last week about Alexander. Alexander the Great became the king at age of 20 after his father was murdered. Within a year and a half, before he turned 22, he launched his first attack against the Persians. And within 3 years of becoming king, he had conquered the entire Near Eastern region. We're told that this goat attacks the ram with a rage. And what we don't know from our context is the Greeks and the Persians had been feuding for a long time. In fact, the Greeks especially resented the invasions of Darius and Xerxes, and Alexander has gone on note in history as saying that he will make them pay. He will make the Persians pay for what they have done. And so there absolutely was a vendetta. There absolutely was a rage when Alexander the Great headed toward Persia. And so Daniel is hearing these things in his dream. And then we hear that at the height of its power, that this horn was broken off. So within about 10 years of becoming king, Alexander the Great had amassed a territory of over 1.5 million square miles. But on his way back from a visit to Babylon, believe it or not, he came down with a fever. And historians say it probably was malaria. And Alexander died at the age of 32 years old. And so here we have this horn at the height of its power, falling off of the goat. And then, just like last time with the leopard, his empire is divided up, as we mentioned, into 4 different kingdoms. And each of these kingdoms is controlled by a different military leader. Keep going in verse 9. Out of one of them came another horn, which started out small, but it grew in power to the south and to the east and toward the beautiful land. We'll talk more about beautiful land later, but just know now that's an idea for Palestine. It grew until it reached the host of heavens, and it threw some of the starry host down to the earth, and it trampled on them. It set itself up to be as great as the commander of the army of the Lord. It took away the daily sacrifice from the Lord, and his sanctuary was thrown down. Because of rebellion, the Lord's people and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything it did, and truth was thrown to the ground. Okay, so we have a ram. We have one empire, and then we have another empire coming over and destroying that one. And then we have the horn. We have Alexander the Great dying, and 4 kingdoms rise up out of there. And out of one of those 4 kingdoms comes something else. Comes another little horn. And this one's going to grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And we made passing reference to this guy last week, that this is a reference to someone named Antiochus the 4th Epiphanes. Antiochus was the 8th king of the Seleucid Greek Empire, and he reigned from 175 to 163 BC. We're told that this little horn starts small but grows bigger. Antiochus was not supposed to be king. In fact, it was his nephew who was in line to be king, but Antiochus was very shrewd, and he was very flattering, and he was very conniving. And so even though he had no real path to being king, he bribed and finagled his way into becoming the king. So he started small, insignificant, and he became king later. He grew much bigger. We're told that this beast, or this horn, threw down the starry host and trampled on them. What does that mean? Okay, we have a couple of options here of interpretations, and it could be one or the other, or I think it also could be both. The first is this, that Antiochus had the high priest Onias assassinated, as well as a lot of the other priests of God's kingdom. And so the starry host here could refer to the holy people of God. And Antiochus is wrecking shop with the holy people of God. He is throwing down the saints and trampling on them. The other interpretation, which I think also works, it could be a both-and situation. Think back to Genesis chapter 1, especially you that were in our Wednesday night class when we went through Genesis. Genesis chapter 1, in the days of creation, we are told that God creates the heavens and the earth, and on one day he creates the sun and the moon and the stars, and we're told that God put the lights in the sky. This would be the starry host. And God put the lights in the sky to do something, to mark out the holy times, to mark out the set-beside holidays, right? So that we could tell what time it is and what day it is by the sun and the moon and the stars. So what Antiochus is going to do in 167 is he's going to announce that temple worship to Yahweh is forbidden, that ceremonial sacrifices to the Lord are forbidden, and that their little festivals that they're going to partake of, all the exciting festivals that we read about in Deuteronomy, all the parties they get to have to God are cut off. So you could say he trampled the stars. He said that you guys don't get to honor those sacrifices anymore. You guys don't get to exist by this ceremonial calendar that you have. He is going to change the set times and the laws. We will talk more about Antiochus later, but I think that will get us through for now. Let's keep going into verse 13. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to him, "How long will it take for this vision to be fulfilled?" the vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, the surrender of the sanctuary, and the trampling underfoot of the Lord's people. And he said to me, it will take 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated. So here we have this voice that calls out to God, this refrain that happens again and again, especially in our lament texts. How long, O Lord? Things look crazy, things look bad. How long, O Lord, is this thing going to last? And most of the time we don't get an answer, but in Daniel's dream, God says 2,300 evenings and mornings. That's a really specific number. So there are a couple of interpretations for these as well. One of them says that an evening and a morning is a day, and so it could be divided in half, so 1,150 days. This one is the least likely, and you have to get really creative with your dates and events in history to make this one make sense. The most common sense means that it's 2,300 days. This is 6 years and 4 months, and if we're looking at our historical calendar, it's almost 6 years and 4 months to the day from the time that Onias is assassinated to the time that Antiochus is overthrown and the temple is rededicated. It's pretty fascinating. So this also could be a symbolic reference that we don't understand, but the 2,300 days works out pretty well if we're looking at our calendar for things that are happening here. Verse 15, while I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one who looked like a man. And I heard a man's voice from the Ulai calling, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. Jeopardy note, this is the first time that an angel is named in the Bible. This is the first time we get an angel's name, and it's Gabriel. As we talked about the importance of this text, and in particular the Son of Man idea, Gabriel is also the angel that shows up in the birth story of John the Baptist and the birth story of Jesus. So Gabriel is a pretty important person to know. As he came near the place where I was standing, I was terrified and fell prostrate. Son of man, he said to me, understand that the vision concerns the time of the end. Is this the end? The end? Are we talking the end of the world? Not necessarily. Most of the time, this phrase implies the end of this prophesied era. So he's saying this is the coming of the end of this prophesied era. While he was speaking to me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground, and he touched me and raised me to my feet. He said, I am going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. The two-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between its eyes is the first king. The 4 horns that replace the one that were broken off represent 4 kingdoms that will emerge from this nation, but will not have the same power. In the latter part of their region, when rebels have become completely wicked, a fierce-looking king, a master of intrigue, will arise. This Antiochus IV. He will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy those who are mighty, the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper, and he will consider himself superior. When they feel secure, he will destroy many and take his stand against the prince of princes. Yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power. Let's not lose sight of the awesomeness of this text right here. We date this around 550, the time of this vision here. And the stuff that's going to happen with Antiochus won't take place for nearly 400 years. But we have prophesied here this idea about one who will rise up from these 4 kingdoms and will be an evil king unlike any they've seen before. And in fact, he will consider himself superior, we read. Well, this is a mina. This is a coin from the reign of Antiochus IV Epiphanes. And you may have known that I've been saying this phrase, Antiochus IV Epiphanes. And if Epiphanes sounds familiar, that is because it is a word that we used in the biblical language. It means God manifest. And so Antiochus IV adopts the name God manifest to describe himself. And in fact, on his coins, it's upside down, but you can see it right here. This is Greek for the word Epiphanes, right here. And so Antiochus IV sets him up against God by calling himself God manifest and even putting it on his coins. And then we hear that he will be destroyed, but not by human power. Well, if we go back and we look, again, 400 years after this vision, and we look at Antiochus IV Epiphanes, his downfall happens in between our Old Testament and New Testament, but this is recorded in the 2nd Maccabees, and the Maccabees write this: But the all-seeing Lord, the God of Israel, struck Antiochus with an incurable and invisible blow, As soon as he stopped speaking, he was seized with a pain in his bowels for which there was no relief, and with sharp internal tortures. And the Maccabees say that he doubled over, died, and fell right off of his chariot right there in the middle of the battle. And 400 years earlier, God reveals to Daniel that this beast, or this horn that comes out, will not die by human hands. Pretty interesting. Let's close it up here, beginning in 26. The vision of the evenings and the mornings that have been given to you is true. But seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future. I, Daniel, was worn out, and I lay exhausted for several days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. I was appalled by the vision. It was beyond understanding. And so the angel speaks to Daniel and says this: what's going to happen is going to happen. But I want you to take this vision, and I want you to seal it up. For this is not going to happen for a long time. And we might read that to say, we want you to, keep it secret. We want you to seal it up and keep it secret. But the idea is not so much keeping it secret, but as protecting it. Because the angel says to Daniel, this is going to happen a long time in the future. And a lot of crazy things are going to happen. And I want you to remember this vision. I want you to remember what you've seen and what you've heard. And I want you to hold it. I want you to keep it. I want you to protect it so that years down the road when things get wild and crazy, you remember. You remember what you were told in this day. In our lockets, we place pictures, mementos, memories, things we want to hold dear and keep with us. We seal them up and we keep them close. And even if we don't have lockets per se, we have pictures, we have sentimental items, we have things that remind us of people, we have things that remind us of places, we have memories that we want to keep close. And we keep them close because there are times in our lives when they are grounding for us. When the world is going nuts and things are going crazy in our lives, and we can look at those pictures, we can look at those moments, we can find those memories, and they do something to us. They help ground us in who we are. We help ground us in who those people are and how our life really is in those good moments. And in Daniel chapter 8, as God's people are in chaos, they're wondering what Cyrus is going to do. The vision comes and says, Cyrus is only the beginning. It's going to get crazier. It's going to get wild. All these kings are going to come and they're going to change hands, and all these kingdoms are going to go through different rules, and these kings are going to be nuts. But there is an end date in sight. There is a time when the Son of Man will come, and he will receive power, and his kingdom will never be shaken. And the angel looks at Daniel and says, seal it up. Keep it with you. Hang on to it so that in those moments you can return to this and be grounded. Remember the vision. Just as in chapter 7, the Ancient of Days is still on the throne, and the Son of Man is still coming. Let's stand together, and we'll sing one more song. If I can pray for you today, I'd be happy to do that. Just come find me down here at the front. Josh.